Well, for the 7th straight season, the Green Bay Packers made the playoffs, but for the first time since 2010, it wasn't because they won the division. The Minnesota Vikings clinched the NFC North by beating the Packers in Week 17, but then the Vikings were eliminated by the Seahawks on Wild Card Weekend. The Packers, of course, eliminated, as we're showing you, by the Cardinals in the divisional round. For so long, the NFC North has been the Packers division. Was this a shift in the crown, or will the Packers continue to regain that type of hierarchy?
No, not a shift, not an overall long-standing shift. But can I take a quick detour here? Of all the highlights you showed, why was the first one of Jay Cutler throwing an interception? That's low-hanging fruit. That's the narrative, right?
His best season as a Bear,
That's right. He had his best touchdown.
That's so the typical Cutler pick.
That's right. Well, that was at the end of the season in a Week 17 matchup with the Detroit Lions. It's just, that's the narrative. That's the low-hanging fruit. It was the only negative highlight I believe we actually saw, but I digress. Look, I think that the Green Bay Packers get back on track. I first want to acknowledge how much I feel, or how strongly I feel, about the job that Mike Zimmer has done with the Minnesota Vikings and how much respect I have for that team. They run the football as well as anybody, and I believe their running game, despite AP getting a little bit older and there is more miles on those tires, probably will benefit because that offensive line will be more intact. They've addressed some issues. Guys are coming back. Defensively, they have playmakers at every level. Linval Joseph is a tremendous interior defensive lineman. Their linebackers are fantastic. Their safeties are good. That's an outstanding defense. The question is Teddy, and I don't know if Teddy has made the progress yet for me to make the decision that they will stay on top in the NFC North. You look at the Green Bay Packers, and they're my pick. Down year for pretty much everybody, and it started with Jordy Nelson going out with the injury. And the domino effect is hard to ignore. Jordy Nelson, maybe an underrated receiver. In my world, a true number one. It forced Randall Cobb to get out of his comfort zone. He becomes the top target, didn't perform well. They asked James Jones to take on a different role. You had some young tight ends. Rodgers stepped up, and at the end of the year had 8 touchdown receptions at the tight end position. There was a lack of comfort. The offensive line was in flux consistently. Aaron Rodgers was sacked 46 times, more than any other quarterback in the NFC North. I don't believe that Aaron played his best football last season. He didn't trust his wide receivers. I don't believe he trusted the protection, and I don't think he played very well. You look at his touchdown-interception ratio, and it wasn't one of his better seasons. But you bring Jordy Nelson back, and that changes everything in the passing game. The offensive line is more secure. I believe Aaron Rodgers goes back to being the Aaron Rodgers we have seen for years and years. They moved Clay Matthews Jr. back to the outside, where he's an even more of an impact player, coming off the edge, getting after opposing quarterbacks. I think they reassert their dominance in the division. It will not be an easy fight for them because the Vikings are a very talented football team. But mostly, when you're comparing teams in this league, you have to focus on the quarterback comparison. Aaron Rodgers versus Teddy Bridgewater, who's in his 3rd season. I'll take Aaron Rodgers with more things in place, more security up front with his wide receivers. So I would certainly vote on the Packers to get back on top.
I would vote for the Packers too, but look, let's call it the way it is, because I think we all love the narrative that you said, Waddle. Jay Cutler and the Bears. Cutler continues to mess up. Aaron Rodgers continues to be the class of the NFL. Aaron Rodgers needs to be better. I get what you're saying about the domino effect, but if we're going to call out Cutler year after year, if we're going to call out Matt Stafford for his decision-making, sure. And another guy who needs to be called out, and I know Packer fans feel this way, it's Mike McCarthy. I mean, this is a guy who gives the play calling and takes the play calling. Who's calling the plays in Green Bay? Is Aaron Rodgers calling the plays? Is their offensive coordinator calling the play? Is Mike McCarthy calling the plays? And I get it. Randall Cobb needs to be better. Clay Matthews needs to be better. This is a team that when they won their first Super Bowl, both of us thought.
I thought they were going on a run, winning a couple in a row, maybe 3 out of 4.
Yeah.
I really did.
We were talking about the Patriots earlier. We were talking about the Spurs and how they've been able to carry through the dominance because Pop and Duncan have been there, when McCarthy and Rodgers have been there, and I think in the last 2 or 3 years, most have entered the season thinking Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in the league. Brady has occasionally gone back out in front in that conversation. Cam now is being talked about as being elite. But Aaron Rodgers, I think, with his age and with his skill level, by most is viewed at, if not the best top 3 quarterback in the league. He needs to be better. They need to go farther in the postseason. And these debates about play calling and guys not being on the same page need to end in Green Bay.
Better how, though, Sylvie? Better with his decision-making? Better by not taking as much of the responsibility on his shoulders? Better in what way?
Well, look, Tom Brady loses skill guys. And we all remember the Monday night game against Kansas City a few years ago when they ended up winning the Super Bowl. And that was the infamous Bill Belichick press conference when he said, we're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati. And you looked at their skill guys and you said, who does Tom Brady have to throw the ball to? Bill Belichick has done him a disservice as to who he's given him. Okay, well, Jordy Nelson goes out. They still have some skill guys there. Aaron Rodgers has to make your guys better when you're considered a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. And now Aaron Rodgers on paper still had a decent year, but what Waddle said is true.
Yeah.
Touchdown to interception percentage drops here, and we ask the greats to be great no matter who you bring in or who you bring out.
I think last year was an anomaly, though, for the reasons I mentioned. And I'm not trying to give Aaron Rodgers a pass. But the year before, 2014, 38 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. This past year, 31 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. I think the body of work speaks for itself. And you're not going to go through your NFL career playing flawless football at all times because the competition you face on a Sunday in and Sunday out basis is very, very good. When you compare him to Tom Brady, you're talking about, in my opinion, the greatest quarterback that has ever played the game. But if you want to be considered the best, or one of the best, you have to have a comparable level of performance with the best. So, I thought Aaron Rodgers played, I won't say poorly, because 31 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, every quarterback in the league or most would die for that touchdown to interception ratio. I thought a lot of it was the issues that he was faced with surrounding him, but there's no question he needs to get better. Again, keep an eye on the Minnesota Vikings, though. If Teddy Bridgewater can take that next step, and I saw some good and I saw some bad from Teddy last year, I thought Teddy's defining moment was that final drive in the playoff game against the Seattle Seahawks, where after an up-and-down performance for the majority of the game in very difficult conditions, Teddy drove them down the field for a chip shot field goal. If not for their kicker missing a chippy, they advance and get past the Seattle Seahawks. So, can he build on that particular performance? We'll see. Teddy has pretty much defined himself in his first 2 years as a win with quarterback, not a win because of quarterback, but he's got plenty of competition or plenty of guys who fit that same mold.
Fascinating that we haven't yet mentioned Adrian Peterson, who for a long time was considered the guy that kind of stirred the drink over there in the Vikings as well. And far be it from me to defend a Packers team, but I think many people would look at the guys that were behind Randall Cobb on the depth chart. Janis, who else was out there? Rodgers was the tight end out there, and say James Jones, who had been let go by his previous team, and say that they did outperform expectations. Do you agree with that?
I don't think they passed the eye test here. I just don't. And if we're always judging these guys now by championships, it seems in 2016 that when it comes to comparing the greats, we immediately go to that championship logger. And Eli's got 2. Ben's got 2. Big Ben's got 2. And again, this is just the greats need to be great. And Aaron Rodgers has won. And he has not advanced far in the postseason. Last year, the Packers were my pick to win the Super Bowl. And I think they...
Pre-Jordy Nelson injury.
Yeah, pre-Jordy Nelson injury. But still, when you watch them play, I think if you watch the Packers on a 16-game basis, they did not move the football like we are used to moving the football. They also had a fat running back. And now he's more in shape, and we'll see where they go.
You have a soft spot in your heart for a fat running back.
Yeah, look, I mean,
they weren't helped by their
done that.
They weren't helped by their defense either, and haven't been for quite some time.
Like I said, Clay Matthews has to be better.
Yeah.
Which oftentimes people wonder why Dom Capers is still employed.
Yeah. There have been signs that they absolutely have gotten better, or they're getting better on defense, but that improvement needs to come as well. There's no question that Aaron Rodgers, the weak link in his career has been his performance in the postseason. His postseason performances record, it doesn't stack up with Tom Brady, but not many do. So I believe they'll get back on top for the reasons I mentioned, but I think it's going to be one of the most competitive divisions in the NFL in 2016.
One thing about Teddy, you know, if we're comparing and we're doing the same game about, well, Jordy Nelson went out and, you know, he was running for his life. You know, Teddy Bridgewater had Stephon Diggs as his #1 target, who came out of nowhere in the middle of last season. He had Mike Wallace, who was a total free agent signing bust and is no longer there. He had a running back who was coming back after missing a full year, basically.
Well, who ran for what, 13 or 1,400 yards?
Sure. And he was pressured more than any other quarterback in the NFL last year, Teddy Bridgewater. He was pressured nearly 50% of the time. 46.7% of all of his dropbacks, Teddy Bridgewater was pressured. Yet he was one of the more accurate passers, needs to get better down.
Check downs.
Right, because he's got no wide receivers.
Which I understand is part of the league.
Protection.
I think he will improve this year. Again, as I said, I was most impressed in the entire season. What I saw from Teddy in that last drive of the playoff game against Seattle was very encouraging to me. Plus, they go indoors. And we've always, Teddy with the glove, the grip on the football, not being able to cut it through the wind. I think the conditions for 8 of the 16 games played indoors will also benefit him. We'll see. Young quarterbacks struggle, and everybody has gone through it. You go back and you look at Peyton Manning, who's one of the best that's ever played the game. Look at his touchdown-interception ratio over the first several years of his career. It's a maturation process. You've got to get used to the speed of the game. And I'm not trying to hate on Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's done some nice things. But to this point, the Vikings have been a run the football, pass when you need to, pass when you kind of occasionally want to, and play excellent defense. They are a direct mirror, a direct reflection of their coach. Mike Zimmer is a tough, aggressive guy who demands a lot out of his players. I think they got it going on in Minnesota. I just don't know that they're going to maintain their spot as the team atop the NFC North.
So, Sylvie, why not the Bears?
No, that's a great question. And I think the Bears could be one of the, look, we go into every NFL season and we say, we know for a fact that there are going to be a few teams that we rank towards the bottom who will be at the top in this year's NFL. Happens every single year.
12 out of 13 years, you've had a last to first happen in the NFL.
There will be teams that we expect to be good who will be bad. There are teams that are going to be ranked poorly and they will be good. John Fox in his second year is what he does best. John Fox takes over bad teams. He took one over in Carolina, and in his second year, they had a huge jump. John Fox had Tim Tebow at the helm in his second year in Denver, and they won a playoff game. Yeah. John Fox is slowly but surely making this his football team. They have to replace some veterans here, Jen. You know this. Matt Forte has been a guy, he's been a workhorse. They have to find an answer. Is Langford the guy? Who else will carry the football? They've drafted some guys in the middle rounds recently. Will Alshon Jeffrey establish himself as a guy who deserves a big contract? And Jay Cutler, who had a better year, who we shouldn't just show interceptions and talk about being a bad body language guy, had a better year. I want him to take another step.
That's the question. And can he take that next step? Adam Gase is now the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Lowell Doggins goes in, or that's his name.
Yeah, Lowell Doggins.
Lowell Doggins. The name's escaping.
Dowell Loggins.
Dowell Loggins. I got his first. There you go. Shame on me. I live in Chicago. The Bears are my team, and I'm mispronouncing the new offensive coordinator's name. Can he have the same effect on Jay that Adam Gase had? Jay loses, as you mentioned, Matt Forte, Martellus Bennett. Those guys accounted for better than 100 catches. When Jay found himself in trouble, it's a very nice outlet to have, Matt or Martellus Bennett. I described the Bears, or defined the Bears last year as a team that was good enough and well coached enough to compete with anybody. But they just weren't talented enough to win more than they lost. And that's a roster issue, and that's a Ryan Pace issue. I believe they got better through the draft than free agency. They bolstered their defense up the middle. Kevin White will come back. He missed his entire rookie season with the shin injury. We'll see where he's at. I believe they're a year away. I believe the coaching staff believes they're a year away from being a legitimate contender. They'll be a better team. They lost a number of games last year by 3 or 4 points. And I think there's a chance this year they'll win some of those games. I don't believe they'll be the cellar dweller in the NFC North this year the way they were last.
I've got them with 9 wins, Jen. I think they're going to win. I think they're going to be a winning team. At worst, 8-8. But this is what John Fox does.
All right, so both of my gentlemen from Chicago picking the Packers, with the Vikings nipping and maybe the Bears nipping at the heels. Packers, for what it's worth, do have a very favorable road schedule this weekend. I believe they only have games against the Vikings and the Redskins as far as playoff teams from last season on their road schedule this year. Up next, Von Miller. We continue in the NFL, still holding out on the Broncos, saying he will not play for that franchise tag. But should he be taking that stance? We'll discuss.